This is Barbara Hepworth, who in her lifetime was called the first great woman sculptor. She began working in the 1920s, when women had only just won the right to vote. A mother of 4 children, her determination to make her mark in an art world dominated by men led to accusations of ruthlessness and neglect of her family. Barbara Hepworth was a pioneer, but in spite of her achievements as an artist, her reputation has been tainted by controversy. Why? Because she tried to have it all. I've always loved this garden that Barbara Hepworth made at her home in St Ives and filled with her sculptures. It may be abstract, but it's not difficult to enjoy. It invites us to touch. Over the last few weeks, I've been discovering more about the woman who could conjure shapes out of feelings. Art in 1920s Britain was largely traditional in style and content. After the violence of the Great War, there was no wish for painting and sculpture to provoke or disturb. The movement in Europe towards an abstract art, led by men like Picasso and Brancusi, had yet to make much impact here, and the idea of a woman being an abstract sculptor was almost unimaginable. So Hepworth had to fight tradition and prejudice to gain recognition.
She'd start work generally at about 8, and then she would work all the way through the day on carving, and then in the evening she would draw. So she generally put in, I would say, looking back, a 12 to 14-hour day, every day.
And her struggle wasn't just to establish herself as an artist. With 4 children to raise, the all-consuming physical demands of making sculpture clashed with her role as a mother.
She was a ruthless person about her work, very dedicated, but she probably had to compromise a bit more. Her awful challenges in her work and her personal life. Her broken marriage affected her seriously.
Yet out of the struggle of her daily life came formidably ambitious art. It might seem extraordinary to us now, but this was a woman who believed that art could change the world. She was born in 1903 into a middle-class family in Wakefield in Yorkshire. Her father, Herbert, was technically minded, her mother, Gertrude, artistic. Hepworth remembered her childhood as a mixture of stern frugality and lavish love. Both parents encouraged her artistic streak. At the age of 7, she watched her headmistress deliver a slideshow on Egyptian art. This ignited a passion for sculpture and the urge to be a sculptor herself. Trips out into the Yorkshire countryside with her father, a county surveyor, were another early influence. She'd sit next to him in his car, and it was the memory of moving through the landscape that stayed with her. She later recalled,
there was the sensation of physically moving over the contours, feeling, touching, seeing through mind and hand and eye. This sensation has never left me. I, the sculptor, am the landscape.
On holiday as a teenager at Robin Hood's Bay on the Yorkshire coast, she'd slip out early each morning to collect stones and seaweed and to draw.
I always felt like a bird flying over magnificent sculptures. The shapes, the rocks on the coast, everything was so clear in my mind. And I think all the ideas for my sculpture were developing down below then.
In 1921, she began studying at the Royal College of Art in London. And it was here that she met the charismatic John Skeeping, a fellow student.
He was very funny, very good company, flirtatious, I think, with ladies, and charming too. Altogether a delightful man.
When Skeeping won a scholarship to travel and work in Italy, Hepworth managed to get one too. And in May 1925, they were married in Florence. They worked side by side for a year, learning to sculpt. In those days, the tradition was to make a small clay model first, which would then be handed over to craftsmen to reproduce full scale in stone or bronze. Hepworth found it a frustrating process. In Italy, she learned a new working method, how to carve stone, cutting directly into the block. She'd work this way for the rest of her life. Back in London, she and Skeeping eventually set up studio together in Hampstead. And in 1929, a friend from art school, Henry Moore, came to live nearby.
I think Barbara remained very close to Henry as a working partner, really, following the same ideas. And it's very important for young artists to have people to look at their work, to criticise, to discuss their ideas. And Henry played that very important role.
All three decided to carve directly in stone. They wanted to extend the language of sculpture, to open it up to the influence of other cultures, not just the European classical tradition handed down from ancient Greece and Rome. They wanted their materials, stone and wood, to express memory and feelings. Barbara Hepworth's attitude to her work was always uncompromising. There'd been women painters before her, but very few sculptors. So she knew that to be taken seriously, she would have to be utterly single-minded. She once said, "I intend to play it hard."
I think the commitment that she had to have to a career was a necessary thing in the period she belonged to, because it wasn't natural for a woman to be successful, let alone up in the front. And to do that, you had to do it twice as hard in order to be taken seriously and not be called, the woman artist, i.e. several notches down from all the other artists who were men. So I think the fierceness about her career was a necessity, in a way it would not have been if she was my age, say. It's a different world now.
She continued carving right up until the birth of her first son, Paul, in August 1929. Afterwards, she went straight back to work. She lived for making sculpture. It was a daily physical obsession. Though she loved being a mother, she could never have given up work. Instead, she tried to juggle work and motherhood. She sculpted with her baby Paul on a rug by her feet. And for a while, it seemed she had the balance right. Hepworth's sculpture was selling well, but by the end of the 1920s, her marriage to John Skeeping was in trouble.
Quite suddenly, we were out of orbit. I had an obsession for my work and my child and my home. John wanted to go free. There was no ill feeling. we fell apart.
My impression of him is that he was very debonair, rather fun-loving, great sportsman, very good at almost anything he did, but in the end probably not very serious. And I think that Hepworth and Skeeping were fundamentally opposed because she was so serious and earnest, and in the end she was too earnest for him.
Oh, baby, baby, I want to be with you tonight.
In September 1931, Hepworth invited a group of friends to join her on holiday in Norfolk. Henry Moore was amongst them, and so was another up-and-coming young artist, the painter Ben Nicholson.
Never have such lovely things happened, Ben, and all the time I'm longing to work because of them. I've never felt like this before. Your dear head is like the most lovely pebble ever seen.
She and Nicholson became lovers, and early in 1932 he moved in to live and work in her Hampstead studio, though he'd periodically disappear off to Paris to visit his wife and children. Nicholson was the son of a successful Edwardian painter, and like Hepworth and Moore, he embraced the new movements in art, design and politics.
If I could be with you.
His landscapes had absorbed the latest ideas of French modern art, and now Hepworth's profile featured over and over again in his work.
I want you to know I will know until you tell me, honey, why I love you so. If I could be with you.
It seemed the perfect match. The passion of the early years of their relationship fueled their art.
Everything I touch and see or hear has a new lease of life and grace because of you.
One of Barbara Hepworth's innovations was to tunnel right through her sculptural form. Now, Henry Moore is often credited with this, but he didn't actually take this approach in his own work until a couple of years later. It's not the first time that a female artist has been overshadowed by a male contemporary. This is Hepworth's first pier sculpture. It was later destroyed in the war, though she did take this photograph of it.
I think what was so exciting about the piercing a hole right through the form was that it extended the sculptural language. It made it more interesting because you had this interplay between the inside of the form and the outside of the form.